Plenary panel, Youth Making Change, Putting Equity into Practice. It's going to be a treat for us to learn from these wonderful, wonderful scholar colleagues. And so I'm going to invite Nishant Shah to come up, who's going to be the moderator and who's going to introduce our illustrious panel. These are people who are on the ground making the kind of change that we hope permeates all the kind of work that we're doing. So Nishant.
Hi, good morning. I have been given the really enviable task of introducing myself. My name is Nishant. I work for the Center for Internet and Society in Bangalore in India, and I'm also a professor of culture and aesthetics of digital media, which is always such a mouthful to say, and I have to translate it from German into English every time I say it. So I teach culture and aesthetics of digital media at Leuphana University in Lüneburg in Germany. And I really do have the privilege of introducing this closing plenary, which is just so exciting because the plenaries so far have been such powerhouses. But if you think you've seen everything, you wait till your socks get blown off today, right? I'm going to take a very, very brief time, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, to just set up what we are talking about in terms of putting equity into practice. So not just design and not just theory and not just discourse and not just research, but what does it mean to kind of talk about equity in practice? And I have 2 very quick stories to tell you. The first one is kind of funny. We started a project called Digital Natives with a Cause in 2007, where we were trying to work with communities in Asia, Africa, and Latin America to just try and figure out what does a digital native look like if it's not a he, if it's not white, if it's not male, if it's not educated, if it does not take access to the internet for granted. And we started kind of interviewing a whole range of stakeholders, right? That's funder speak for different people. We just started interviewing a whole range of stakeholders, so academics, policy actors, government employees, educators, all kinds of things. And everybody was super excited. They all wanted to talk to us about this young generation that's doing things to the world around them. And then we actually started talking to the people, which is, people who might or might not claim themselves to be digital natives. And they looked at us with this worldly wariness and said, why do you want to speak to us? And we said, we want to tell your story. They said, I'm already telling my story. I said, but it needs to be heard. They said, we're already being heard. And then we said, but we want to do research. And which one of the participants in South Africa looked at me and then she said, all right, fine, tell me what you want me to say. And let's get it over with. Yeah? Because they were so tired of other people coming and telling their stories and then them having no control of what happens to those stories, how they travel, what do you do with it. That was exciting for us because it changed the very nature of the project, where we stopped pretending to be people who are interested in them for their sake and made it transparent that we had particular agendas. We had certain kinds of imperatives that we were approaching them for. And to convert them into a stakeholder or give them equity was a very different thing. That if young people participate in scripts that we narrate, then that's not really equity. That's merely performance of equity. And what do you do with something as structural like that in some forms? And the second story is perhaps closer to home for me and also slightly visceral or personal. So since 2009 at the Center for Internet and Society in Bangalore, we've been doing a project called Pathways to Higher Education from support by the Ford Foundation, which works with about 1,000 undergraduate kids in 9 colleges across the country. And these kids are all identified as socio-economically disadvantaged, right? So they are special admissions into first-year undergraduate colleges, which means that they're supposed to be taken better care of. They're supposed to be given more concessions if they don't perform well enough in classrooms because it's affirmative action and it's corrective action of certain kinds. And we worked with these kids to do a lot of the things that participatory technologies or DIY projects or equity in technology and change kind of mandates us to do. So we would do workshops with them, we would train them in using social media, teaching them how to code, giving them first-time access to digital communities, and identifying social and structural problems which are around them and making interventions with it. So As far as our funders were concerned, the project was a huge success, right? You had like 923 out of the 1,000 kids sustaining with the project over a period of more than 4 years, identifying different kinds of community structures that they belong to, working with different problems which were at intersections of technology, what you would call race, we would possibly call caste in India, questions of poverty, questions of precariousness, questions of violence and drugs and so on. But in the very first year, when we were chatting with them, and then we did like this 1-year debrief about what the project was like and what it was like to actually be working on questions like this, one of the students, she was 17, she said, it was so great, and we learned all these things, and we worked with our communities, and we have so much value in all of it, but the most difficult part of it was to work when you were hungry. And that was, I felt my hand shaking at that point, right? So because I do come from incredible privilege in India in terms of finances, family, or the kind of access to resources I have, I do not share the same social or political contexts with them. And I looked at her and said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I wake up at 5:30 in the morning, and then I commute for an hour and a half on public transport to reach college, which starts at 7. Classes go on till 12:30. Then I have a part-time job, and I have to work because my family needs me to work. Like, the only condition they would allow me to get into college is that I continue working. So I work from 12:30 to 4. And after that, I come to the Pathways cell, and then I learn my Facebook and my social media, and I do all these community interventions, which ends at around 7. And then I take the public train home back, and I reach at 9. And then I said, but I knew a little bit about the family, and I said, but you can afford to bring lunch with you, right? You can pack food from home and bring it to school. And she said, no, because we are in college. It's not cool to brown bag in college, right? We are already identified so much on the fringes as these special kids who have come with like special admissions that there is no way by which we are going to brown bag. And it turned out that this wasn't a one-off story, that all of them were literally having one meal at 5:30 in the morning before they left home, and the next meal at 9 in the night when they went back. And one of the things that they couldn't do was to buy food from the college, because while they could have afforded to buy food at a subsidy, the college had completely given away the catering to private companies, right? So it's Subways and McDonald's and Pizza Huts who run their stores, and there is no subsidy for students. And we stopped right there. We said, maybe we don't need to think about equity merely in terms of you performing equity as I imagine it, bringing in people from underprivileged communities into the fold. Maybe we need to talk about equity and hunger. And what they did was then a campaign in the school itself where they started Bring Back the Brown Bag Thursday, where they started making it cool within the school for everyone to bring a brown bag. And then to make it more interesting, there was no ownership of brown bags, which means everybody pulled the bags together, and then you picked up whichever came to you, and then you ate whatever was in it, right? I thought it was a fantastic project, and it kind of thought about equity and infrastructure in a very different way, which is not about access, which is not about technology, which is not about adoption and reaching out elsewhere. But maybe equity, like charity, begins at home, and maybe it needs to begin with the personal. And I wanted to kind of just lay out these two stories to talk about these very easy buzzwords of participation, of engagement, of collaboration, of usage, which get thrown around so easily when talking about equity, as if equity is a series of check boxes which can be tick marked and saying if these have been performed, we are done with it. So those are the two stories I wanted to kind of lay out for us in order to invite this incredible panel who I think in their work show us what it means to actually put equity not into design but into practice. What are the material circumstances? What are the lived experiences? And what are the ways in which our bodies are broken continuously by different intersections of technology and power? And how do you kind of work with them in order to put things into their own place? So will you please welcome me in joining the three panelists today, who each one of them is such a brilliant superstar. I was just telling them the best part about moderating a panel like this is that you can say very little, and then they can all be brilliant, and you get to take credit for all of it, right? Just to make sure I don't do that, let me really quickly shut up and introduce the three panelists today. It's David Sengeh, Leshell, Hatley, and Fabian, Debora. Can I please get you all on stage? And can you please join me in welcoming them? Thank you. I'm going to do very quick introductions from their exhaustive bios, so I'm going to miss out on some things, but just to give you a sense of what the panel looks like, and then I'm going to hand over to them. So on the very left is David Sengeh. David was born and raised in Sierra Leone. He's currently a PhD candidate at the MIT Media Lab. His research in the biomechatronics group focuses on the design of comfortable prosthetic sockets and wearable interfaces. This work is at the intersection of medical imaging, material sciences, human anatomy, computer-aided design, and manufacturing. David's on the Forbes 30 Under 30 in Technology for 2013, a 2014 TED Fellow, on the Wired Smart List for 2013, winner of the Lemelson MIT National Collegiate Student Prize, and other awards. He has been invited to give many talks at institutions like the United Nations, corporate and academic organizations on topics related to education, youth innovation, prosthetic designs, and more. He is the president and co-founder of the international NGO Global Minimum Inclusion. Currently, GMIN's main project is to innovate challenges, the first ever competition created to foster a culture of innovation among high school students in Sierra Leone, for example. As of this week, David is also now the National Geography Explorer Fellow, and he continues to work as a lyricist and a rapper, making music that draws youth towards creativity and away from drugs and gangsterism. Next to David is Fabian Debora. Born in El Paso, Texas, and raised in Boyle Heights, California, Fabian has been creating art since his childhood. Beginning his art career in '95 as a member of the East Los Angeles Streetscapers, Fabian was mentored by many Chicano artists and muralists and was introduced a creative expression in all forms, from graffiti to murals to sketching and other forms of visual art. Over the years, Fabian has created murals throughout East Los Angeles and continued to develop his style through work on canvas. He's been showcased in solo and group exhibitions throughout the United States, including Santa Barbara, Los Angeles, and Kansas City. Fabian's currently a director of substance abuse services, as well as a counselor and mentor at Homebody Industries in Los Angeles, and also the art director of Jack Lee's Art Academy with Latino Producers Action Network. Fabian continues to use art as a vehicle to communicate and educate and touch people throughout his journey by conceptualizing and interpreting his personal experiences as well as the experiences of his community. And last but not the least is Leshell Hatley. Leshell is the founder and executive director of Uplift, Inc., and its research and development center for learning and education media called CLEM. She's a certified K-8 teacher and a PhD student. She's a passionate computer engineer. Hey, somebody in the plenary was asking about female computer engineers yesterday. We have one name now. She's a passionate computer engineer, educator, and researcher who continuously combines these three attributes to create innovative approaches to teaching students between the ages of 3 and 73. She has logged over 15,000 hours teaching African American and Latino elementary, middle, and high school students in STEM concepts through New York, New Jersey, and DC. She also created an educational animation and digital learning series called Miles and Aisha, which features 2 young African-American learning companions who explore the world and concepts related to STEM, reading, and history, while simultaneously teaching their audiences through interactive games and activities. Overall, this project and other professional aspirations are especially enhanced by her being a PhD student at George Mason University in the Learning Technologies division. That was a mouthful, and believe me, this is only like part of everything that they have done. But this is just to give you a setting up for what is going to come to you. We're going to begin with David. What we have is 10 minutes inputs for the plenary from each session. Then we get into a conversation, and then we hopefully get to open the floor and get more interactive with it. So David, we're all yours. Thank you.
Good morning. So I will briefly talk about some of the things that my organization, this organization I help lead, that's composed of many amazing people all around the world, but specifically in Kenya and Sierra Leone is up to through 3 programs. And I'd like to really discuss the kind of young people who are emerging out of the programs that we've been doing over the last 3 years. And in short, there are 3 main programs that we've done. One of them is the Innovation Challenge, and what that really means is we as which we're currently doing that in Sierra Leone, like live, and one of our colleagues, Mahmoud, is traveling all across Sierra Leone, is we engage young people, invite them to think about challenges in their community, tell us how they want to solve those challenges, and in return, we give them feedback, create opportunities for them to build prototypes. We invite a couple to a camp over a 3-day period where they learn how to give feedback to each other, learn how to receive feedback, also take a lot of hands-on creative workshops, and then we further give them resources to go out and build those prototypes in their communities. And over the year, we get to give them multiple other pathways in which they can develop their prototypes. So for example, next week we have about 3 young girls who've been working on some solar technology coming to MIT to hang out at the Eureka Fest Invention Challenge. So we do this. And we have a couple of other kids who've gone on to the African Leadership Academy in South Africa, or the African Leadership University, and multiple other ways. So we, again, for the Innovation Challenge, find these kids, help them to develop solutions, and then really mentor them so that they can grow, and then they have all these pipelines that we've set up that they continue working through. A second program we do is the Innovation Labs, and what that is, again, is we go to a community, and we're setting up one in Kenya right now with from the generous funding from the Lemelson Foundation. We go to a school, a partner school, and have a bunch of tools in the curriculum and engage with the teachers and set up activities for students, not just in those schools, but others in the community to come and learn various hands-on tools. And then the last program really came out of circumstance, right? The context was in Sierra Leone, we had Ebola, and there were no schools. And everybody shut down their schools, and we told kids to go home. And what Jimin did and Innovate Salon is we started a program called Hack at Home, where we engage kids on WhatsApp groups. So there are WhatsApp groups in every community. On Facebook, we interacted with about 900 kids. And in real life, we meet them and give them journals and engage them. So we give them a challenge, like come up with a creative Ebola message, and then they have 2 weeks to work in these teams to come up with that message. And what we do, again, is interact with them, help them print T-shirts, help them print posters, or different things that then we go out and deploy. And for those who are developing personal protective equipment, for example, we let them interact with the heads of the National Ebola Council. So these are 3 programs that we've been doing. One focused on the large scale, get every young person to think and innovate in the thousands in Sierra Leone and Kenya. The second being the Innovation Lab, where you get a small group of people within a small geography to really zero in on a bunch of activities. And the third being a program that happened as a circumstance, but really engage kids on the digital platform, primarily WhatsApp and Facebook. So this is what we do. But I wanted to condense a bunch of these kids into 3 categories of people that we see, the leaders that they emerge as when they've engaged with us in multiple ways. We see social entrepreneurs, right? And because they have to develop prototypes mostly, because they need to go and execute their projects, because we talk to them about scale, they eventually end up making some kind of impact. The gentleman that you see in all black at Osborne is 19. Today he's raised well over $135,000. We invested in him $1,500 and brought him and engaged with him and interacted and connected him with all kinds of mentors. But through our pipeline, he became an Echoing Green Fellow. He won the Anzisha Prize Energy division from the continent. And he's gone on to blossom, where he's created a company with affiliates, members of ours who are now on his board, and gone on to employ people within his community with a bunch of other young people who are taking time off school. Their parents are not the most happy about this, but Tom today is taking time off school to run this company. And when I met Tom in Kenya last year, and we were sitting down and we went to lunch, and I was like, so Tom, tell me a story about your experience over the last year. And then he had many stories to share. But one of those was, if we want to have some people in government or whoever to come and look at our site far away, we take them out to lunch. Now, that sentence, that life lesson that he learned, wasn't that he takes them out to bribe them. He doesn't do that. But he takes them out into a context where they can talk what was most important, where they can talk over food, they can be social. Now, that lesson is not stuff that Tom would have gotten if he wasn't problem solving, if he wasn't acting, if he wasn't running the company. And it's a lesson I learned from him. And it's work and policy and all of this good stuff doesn't need to happen in an office, but you can create an environment and an understanding of the people you're working with such that you can be most effective. So we have these entrepreneurs, and Tom is one example that embodies that, and there are many others around. A second category of people we have is these civic leaders, right? So Adama is one of my favorite example as well. And Adama also was given multiple opportunities to share her story and get mentored by a lot of people. One of my friends actually will go and visit Adama in her hometown. Adama had applied to work on cholera. She was personally affected by cholera when there was an outbreak, and we supported her through this. Fast forward, when Ebola happened, she reached out to us again to say she wants to use that same network that she had. She wanted to go out and engage with community members and talk to them about the messaging. Because what she had done for her program when she was a finalist with us was, again, to build wells and engage in public health messaging, similar skill sets that she was able to use down the line, right? So we build these through our programs. There are these young people who become civic leaders who are, again, engaging in communities. And there are these, like this final category is kind of boxed with a bunch of different things, right? We build leaders who are inspirational, right? So you might know the Kelvin Doe story. The video we did about him is somewhere upwards of 8 million views. But it doesn't matter where we are. Most importantly, in Sierra Leone, Kenya, or any of our communities, there's somebody who says, hey, I saw that video, and hey, you know what? I'm now building something. Hey, I'm now doing electronics from Sierra Leone to kids who contact us to Mexico or Brazil, wherever we've been. There has been one person who's come up to us to say, I was inspired to do something, and they're mostly young, and this is what I did. But I really wanted to end on the story of Mohammed Hadin. He's one of my favorite mentees, and I interact with him all the time, and I actually interacted with him yesterday. But it's a relationship that started when I posted on Facebook that I was going back home one of my holidays. He knew that I would be home. He knew what church I'll attend, and he met me after church, and he interacted with me around his desire to want to be mentored and be part of the programs that we do. And then we started having a relationship. He applied and was one of the finalists for the Innovate Salon Challenge. But then he went beyond that. He helped set up the Innovation Lab at Prince of Wales. And he'll bring together multiple students, not just to the school, but to his home to build and hack things together. All right, so we interacted and we paved the way for him. Well, he ended up going to South Africa, to the African Leadership Academy, where he ends up working on the strategy team, and now he's working on a company called Afrique Lighting, because one of the things he did when he was a young person in our program was to build modular lighting units, because he wanted to be reading using these lighting units, and he's building the plan, sent me a really comprehensive plan about what he wants to do when he does workshops out in Johannesburg. But the story that I wanted to share about my interaction with Mohammed was one of the students Mohammed mentored in the first year reached out to me again via Facebook recently and goes, hey, Mr. David, hi, what's up? We interacted, like, tell me what's going on. And he sent me a bunch of photos, and it was photos of other young people who he was hosting in his house, precisely because, as he said, that's what Mohammed did. And precisely because he's influenced by Mohammed. Now, I didn't know this kid. I didn't interact with him. I certainly have not interacted with the people in my organization necessarily. Well, the organization has interacted with him. But the rest of the kids who were coming to his home, are not coming to us because we reached out to them, but it's because Mohammed was influenced by us and mentored. He created an opportunity for this kid to learn and grow. And now this kid has created an opportunity for even many more people to come to his house to interact and build and work on these projects. It's that level of influence that we dream of. It's the level of opportunity, and I think that's what, to tie it to our theme, that's what equity is, right? We care about equity of experience and equity of opportunity. The fact that I'm here is that I had a set of opportunities that many other kids in my age grade didn't have. A set of opportunities to talk to people because my dad worked at UNICEF, a set of opportunities to participate on national programs because I was at a good public school. That is not what everybody has. I had a set of opportunities that made me take action and learn from it. Now, those are the same set of opportunities that we are trying to create through our programs. But what's most important is that those set of experiences are not just stuck with the individuals, but we find a way in which through our programs that those individuals themselves become the leaders who go on to mentor and who go on to express that curiosity amongst all other young people. And that's what we care about, and that's what we've been working on. And I'd love to tell you many more stories in the Q&A. Thank you.
I gotta remember to turn this on. Okay. Good morning, everybody. As you know, my name is Leshell Hatley, and these are images of various ways in which I create digital media, work with students, have them create digital media, learn, teach, etc. I just wanted to give a quick overview, but I'll talk about these in a second. First, I have an activity for you all to do. I'm going to show you a series of images. I think there's 10, but there could be 11. I might have miscounted this morning in my nervousness, so excuse me. But I'm going to show you 10 images really quickly. I'm not sure if it's going to be 30 seconds, 10 seconds. It depends on how fast you respond. What I want you to do is shout out the first thing that you see in the images. And again, they're going to go really quickly, but I want to see what actually, I want to get the pulse of the DML community. Those of you who are watching live stream, you can text your answers to the number at the bottom. Unfortunately, they won't be counted in real time, but I will certainly count them later and blog about this experience so you can find out. I have raters in the audience so we do innovator reliability. All my raters, please raise your hand. There should be, actually, in the back, you're not a rater, you're another kind of participant. Jenna? Right. So there's the three raters. What they're going to do is they're going to basically write down the loudest object that they hear. So whatever you say, they're going to write down. Hopefully it's just one word or maybe two. And then I have three people who are going to document their experience. So they can yell, but they're also going to write down the word that they see. And those three people are 1, 2, 3. Right. Can't remember everyone's name, so thank you for participating. Are you all ready? So, of course, with any study, you have a pilot. This is practice. What do you see?
Robot.
All right, we'll try that. The Raiders, you got that? I'm going to participate too. Raiders, did you get that? Yes? All right. So that is our practice. And I heard Kermit now. Did everybody agree with that? All right, so here we go. This is going to be quick. Write down the first thing or shout the first thing you see. We need to try that. All right. We probably needed 3 practices. All right, here we go. One more time. Okay, next.
Excitement.
Next. Next. Next.
Joy.
Next. 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 But next. Next. All right, next. All right, so if the Raiders would bring those up and put them over here, and all the people who participated writing down what they said, bring them and put them over here, and I'll count them in a second. Thank you very much. So I actually wanted to see what the pulse is, because when I actually participate with all of the people that you see, I see people. You all saw robots, you saw Superman, you saw a computer. Let's see. Some people said a smile, so I'll count that as seeing the kid. Chess, I heard here. Let's see. Computer, Superman, kids. Interesting how this image, the only image that contained, other than people of color, you saw the people. Interesting. I kind of knew that would happen, unfortunately, or fortunately for my talk. And here you saw me, which is good because you're looking at me as kind of the same setting. So this is kind of an interesting, quick experiment. And I will, again, blog about it, even with people who participated online. This one is interesting, and we'll talk about this one more specifically. So let me introduce myself now. My name is Leshell Hatley again. I've been teaching for over 15 years before the STEM acronym even became the STEM acronym. I joined this particular community in 2010 as a third DML competition winner with a program called Youth App Lab. I won with Youth Radio and with MIT when they were proposing to do Scratch 2.0. All of the winners, we, of course, got to know one another, but I mentioned those three because I still work with those two organizations very closely. Youth Radio, because we have a very, very close relationship because we were the first youth organizations to use App Inventor before they released it to the public. And so by doing that, we were the first organizations in the country to start youth building mobile apps. So programs where youth are programming mobile apps in the country. And so as you can see, there are youth building mobile apps all over the country, and we have definitely started a movement. So definitely appreciative of that experience. And then in 2013, I became a research fellow, and I'm here with some of my colleagues. Some of them participate, thank you very much. So I just wanted to share a little bit about me and how I became a member of this community. Now, if you remember, we won in 2010, and 2011 was our first DML conference. How many of you were at the 2011 DML conference? Okay, cool. I started the Youth App Development Program, Youth App Lab, in October of that year. Students, we started teaching very basic information. What is a computer? What's a keyboard? How does a keyboard work? How does a hard drive work, et cetera? So you can imagine, and then we went to Scratch, of course, in terms of teaching how to program. And then we went to App Inventor. Now, in timing, that put us just learning App Inventor around late December, early January. The conference was in February. And so we were on the phone, all the winners said, hey, you gotta actually showcase your program somehow. What are you gonna do? And so I was last to talk, and I heard people talking about they're gonna 3D print food, and they're gonna do all these amazing things. And I'm like, wow, we haven't even started developing apps. What are we gonna do? I don't understand. So I was like, I gotta represent. My students would be upset if I just said, oh, we're just gonna have a display table. So I said, we're gonna make an app within the 3 days of the conference. As a matter of fact, we're gonna challenge the audience to tell us on that first day which app to make. And by Saturday, we're gonna make the app. So, of course, they looked at me like I was crazy when I went back to class, but I was like, you can do it, you can do it. So I brought Hamza and Kwaku. Hamza is in the middle. Kwaku is the one on the outside. I'll share a little bit about what they're doing right now in a second. But on that Thursday, we tweeted, hey, send us app ideas. And the app idea that we got about 5. The app idea that we chose was an app that would exchange information with any mobile phone, whether it was a smartphone or otherwise, and it would essentially exchange your business card information very easily. So we chose that, and the gentleman in the black shirt is the one who texted us the idea. These 2 gentlemen, I was like, okay, so I can help if you want, right? You got less than 48 hours. I can help if you want, but just I'm here. They were like, oh, Mr. Shell, we got it. They finished the app Friday afternoon. I was like, are you sure you're finished? Like, you got to show this to the whole entire community. Every conference attended. They're going to want to see that this works. Are you sure? They're like, yeah, Mr. Shell, we got it. So we tweeted, app is finished. Come to the display area where all the winners were located. It was about as many people in this room, and I'm sitting there like, okay, here we go. So true enough, our phones didn't have reception in the place where we were showcasing, so we had to volunteer or ask for a volunteer of someone to give us their phone. So now there's another unknown variable, right? We have no idea if this phone even works. We got to install our app on it and then in front of all these people show that it works. Sure enough, there was one technical glitch, but maybe 3 minutes later, the app works fine, and Kwaku and Hamza were sold on app development from that point on. Sold on programming. This is another, so of course they became the stars of the conference, right? Afterwards, everyone came and talked to them. This is a picture of, does anybody recognize what this is? Mitch, right, it's Mitch Resnick talking to them. They actually absolutely love talking to them. But they have lines, the 3 of us had lines of people just trying to understand what is Youth App Lab. And they concluded, Ms. Leshell, they never saw Black Boys program before, huh? I was like, I guess not, So they actually learned a lot from that experience. Right now, Hamza just blows me away. He is a permanent internship at Microsoft. His second, he couldn't come this year because he's working, right? He's working on their cloud product. This is 5 years later. He came to me about a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Shah, I want to take you to dinner. I'm like, all right. Usually I drive, right? So we go to the parking lot after one of the classes I had, which his little brother is enrolled in. And I go to, put my stuff in the car, and all of a sudden I hear, doop, doop, doop. Like, whose car? There's only 2 cars in the driveway. Hamza rolls up with a 2015 Honda that he bought on his salaried position. And he was like, oh, yeah, dinner's my treat, too. So Hamza is really doing well. Kwaku is also doing well. But he chose the route of being a musician. He went to Duke Ellington High School. He was in the 8th grade at that time. He went to Duke Ellington High School. He just graduated. And he has received, I think, maybe 4 or 5 scholarships to different colleges of music around the country. You will definitely see this kid at some point soon if you haven't already. So I'm really, really proud of the 2 of them. But in terms of equity, so what does all this mean? How did we get a Hamza and a Muhammad? Muhammad is Hamza's brother. How do we get a Hamza and a Kwaku to the point of succeeding this well? And Youth App Lab was the first time they participated in any programming experience whatsoever. Equity, right? I see them. Not only do I see them as kids or youth, I automatically assume that they will succeed. I'm not interested in introducing technology to help them build their intelligence. I'm not interested in using technology as a tool to boost their, academic performance in any way. That happens automatically, and I have confidence in that from day one, that if they're given the support and a safe environment that they need, they can flourish. This is an interesting image that I saw online one time. What do we want kids to do with technology? Some people who are of the mindset, let's really focus on technology. Let's teach them how to blog. Let's teach them how to use Prezi. Teach them how to produce videos. Teach them how to make apps, right? Those aren't really the right answers. They're the wrong answers in a sense. The right answers are under the right answer column, of course. Raise awareness, start conversations, find answers, collaborate, essentially, change minds, make a difference, take action, drive change. And to just give you a little tidbit about, well, Leshell, you just told us you won for Youth App Lab to create, to have kids create apps. Well, I was applying for the DML competition from the first one. The third one was just happened to be the one I won. But I had been teaching kids how to make interactive CDs. I had been teaching them how to make web pages. So apps was just it was the next step. So it wasn't really a brilliant idea for me, but I'm glad DML community loved it, and I'm glad to be here. So really, when it comes to equity, first you gotta assume automatically that these kids can perform just as well as anybody else, point blank. You can't see the robot first. You can't see intelligence first. You can't see Superman first. Shout out to the video or movie. You have to really give them voice and make them feel comfortable. So to that point, this is, I'll call her Christina. She was a student of mine 2 summers ago, maybe 3 summers ago, in a summer youth employment program in Washington, D.C., had never programmed a day in her life. She was the only girl in the program at the time on the first day, and she really was looking at all of us like, why am I here? I don't even know. This is even the job that I chose. I don't even know how I ended up here. Christina, on the first day, what I do, I don't know if everyone else does this, but what I see is when it comes to students of color trying to learn STEM or STEAM fields, the first thing that you have to break down is their lack of self-confidence and their lack of self-esteem and their sense that this is not a place for them. Christine, I think on the 3rd or 4th day, I asked her a question, and it literally took her 45 minutes to answer. She had no voice. She had no comfort. Again, she was looking around at us like, what are you doing here? Why are you waiting? I'm just going to wait it out. And I waited it out with her. We all said, okay, we'll wait. Now, a teacher, after 5 minutes, after 3 minutes, after 2 minutes, would have went on to someone else, and Christina would have won. And who knows when she would have gotten her voice. I even, that day, said, you know what, Christina, you can actually write down what you want to say, and then just read it. So actually, after about 25 minutes, that's literally what she did. She started writing, and then when it was time for her to read it, she started scribbling it out. This is the point of equity that we need to deal with. Eventually, she became the project manager of the team. They went on that year to develop Water Drops, which is an app, a game, and an HTML-based website talking about how the importance of drinking water. The app is on Google Play right now. You can use it to count how many glasses of water you drink per day, and it takes a cumulative count from the time you start using the app of the number of glasses of water you drink. So I told you I was going back to this, intelligence and safety. What was the winning word for this one? Safety. Good. That's actually good. I'm happy about that. If you noticed yesterday in Nicole Pinker's presentation, she must have used safety about, her and Brother Mike must have used safety about 10, 15 times. All you need is an environment where young people feel safe to be themselves, to show you how intelligent they are. Not an environment where you're trying to increase their intelligence. Yes, you want them to learn things, but you should not assume that you're there to teach them, right? That shouldn't, like, you are the instructor, the cliches about how you're not trying to fill an empty vessel, right, as an instructor. Take that across the board. So I even put intelligence at the top just to see if everyone would see that first. I cheated a little bit. So I'm glad you chose safety. So again, here are various projects that I have done over the past 10 or 15 years or so, the most recent that I want to highlight is Urban Kid. It started out as a game design studio, so we teach kids how to make games so they can make money and sell them. Our goal ultimately is to create a game on Xbox, on the indie channel. But it actually turned into a movement because I had students, parents of all ages. I think the youngest in the room was 6, and the oldest, there must have been about 5 parents in the room. And I said, when Urban Kid comes to mind, what definition do you know? What comes to mind when I say the word Urban Kid? And they all said something along the lines of a negative kid, stereotype, etc. Somebody who's bad in the street. So we decided on that day to turn Urban Kid into a larger movement, to redefine what Urban Kid is to the rest of the world. And so definitely be on the lookout for Urban Kids. It's going to be an amazing journey. And I think that's it. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I'm here to give you a little overview of Homebody Industries, and I am like you were. Let's just say I'll share a little bit about what we do at Homebody Industries and how Homebody Industries has empowered me to go back out into my community and continue to impact the lives of those young individuals from Boyle Heights, Highland Parks, and the inner cities. Homebody Industries is the largest gang intervention in the country, and it was founded by Father Greg Boyle, a Jesuit priest. We've been in existence for over 26 years, and we've been able to expand throughout the years. And initially, Father Greg Boyle came into the housing projects in the 80s, which was with the crack cocaine epidemic and the decade of violence. At that time, I was growing up in the projects myself, and so I've known Father Greg since I was 10 years old. And I remember initially there was a lot of violence, and I come from immigrant parents, and I'm a first-generation Mexican-American. And it's very crucial for a child to contain his innocence, especially growing up in the 80s and in the housing projects where these 8 local gangs were plaguing that area. My father was a heroin addict, and so that's where the impact of trauma began. And for me, I'm going to paint this picture as how I met Father Greg and their wraparound services and how it influenced me to really reclaim my self-worth. My father was a heroin addict. There was a lot of domestic violence at the household. My poor mom she'll always get beat. And here I am at 6 years old when the expectation is that you get an education, stay in school, get an education so that you can have a great career. But I'm impacted by trauma. I would love to stay in school and get a great education, but that's not my concern. My concern is if my father is going to beat my mom, or am I going to find my father overdosing in the restroom again. So these are the things that a lot of the youth that I work with are still dealing with to this day in 2015. And so because of that, I discovered the gift of art. And at the age of 6, and every time I would hear my mom scream and she was yelling for help, I knew I couldn't help her. I would go and hide under a coffee table with my notebook and create my own worlds to escape my reality. That's when I discovered art to be meaningful. It gave me a glimpse of hope, my self-worth, so I held on to that. But eventually, graffiti art was looked upon and frowned upon as vandalism, so I would hang out in the LA River and create art because no one had access. I didn't have access. Single mom, no art school, financially deprived. If I would have had an art school then, maybe my life would have took a whole different direction. But mom could only do what she could with what she had. So all that, eventually I lost the battles towards that. I joined the gang at the age of 10. I started to experiment with drugs at the age of 10, alcohol and marijuana. I went to Dolores Mission Catholic School where an 8th grade teacher decided he ripped my artwork. And I remember that day when he ripped my artwork. I was 2 weeks into graduation, and I remember when he said, Fabian, you need to stop drawing in class. And I'm like, dude, I've been sent to the principal's office since 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, constantly in the principal's office because I love to draw. And so I remember when he did that, and he says, Fabian, you need to stop drawing in class. So he comes around, and he gets my artwork, and he rips it in my face, literally ripped it. And when he did that, he literally ripped my heart. And I remember all the trauma seemed to come back up. My father, the heroin addict, my mom with the black eyes, all that came about when the teacher ripped my artwork. And I threw a desk at him. And when I threw a desk at the teacher, of course, Fabian's the bad guy. He's not supposed to do that. I get expelled, and they killed my dream of graduating. And that's when the vacuum of gang culture sucked me in. And then the sad thing is that when they expelled me from school, where did they send you to? Father Greg Boyle. I met Father Greg at the age of 10, and unlike anybody in that class, in that school, Father Greg says, son, what happened? I said, well, this dude ripped my artwork, and I'm not going to let that happen. And so when he goes, damn, son, I'm not going to be able to keep you in school. You're going to get expelled. He goes, but before you leave, son, I want you to do something for me. I go, what's that, Father Greg? I want you to go home and draw me something. And for the very first time, I wasn't punished and penalized for what I love to do. He recognized my strength, my gift, art, and he returned it back to me. I say that story, I have many stories. Stories are very valued to us at Homebody Industries because we recognize that every life matters. And there are certain circumstances that make individuals join gangs. The three things we've discovered throughout the 26 years of existence with Homebody Industries is that white kids join gangs is because of hopelessness, disparity, that's one. At the same time as the trauma and mental illness. Those three things is why kids tend to join gangs. And the absence of hope is one main thing that Homebody Industries has rekindled in that organization. We've created a community of kinship so that they can come into Homebody Industries and learn to re-identify to the truth of who they are by being acknowledged, by being recognized, by giving opportunity where they can come and rediscover and redream again when no one else has given them that opportunity. So that's Homebody Industries. We have wraparound services such as, self-help groups, parenting, anger management, substance abuse. We also created like 5 to 6 enterprises, Homegrown Cafe, Homeboy Bakery, Homeboy Seal Screen, and Homeboy Seal Screen, farmers markets, and we're starting to expand and getting bigger and bigger. At one point, Father Greg had a lot of controversy. They said that gang members don't deserve a second chance, and I'm glad that Father Greg had a different perspective on that, and that he stood his ground, and here we are 26 years later, and we are making the most impact into public safety ourselves, and here I am, hope in the flesh in the sense that if I wasn't given the opportunity, then I would not be able to go back into my community and impact those life of the youth. Again, I'm a storyteller, and I brought some pictures of my work that I do now because of the fact that I was able to redirect my life and reclaim my life. I've been out of gangs since 1994. I have been clean and sober for approximately 9 years, which led me back to go get my education, and then got my KDAC 2 by the state of California. So that's what makes me the director of substance abuse services within Homebody Industries. And now, because of the passion of art and how Father Greg returned the gift of art back to me, I'm able to use my art as a healing tool for trauma. So this picture here, if you look at this picture, that's me with the kids from Tijuana. I like to go over to Tijuana and also recognize and make connections, because there's a lot of misconceptions that the United States hasn't made, or you're from the United States, you're more fortunate than we are, and the trauma is the same. Doesn't matter what corner of, if it's Mexico or Los Angeles, it doesn't matter, the trauma remains the same. So these two kids here, if you see the little boy and little girl, they're sitting on my lap. When I first got to Tijuana, of course, the little girl would not really get near me because, of course, I'm a male figure. And I couldn't understand why she would not get near me, but her little brother was so intrigued by my presence, and we went over there to paint a mural. And I asked the lady over there, I said, why is it that little girl doesn't seem to want to participate? And then she kind of explained to me she's dealing with a lot of abuse as well as a lot of alcoholism. Her father has been not very nice to her. And so I said, okay, that's cool. So I continue to do my workshop, acknowledge them for who they are, for what they're worth, and doing what I have to do. And gradually she started taking steps closer and closer to me. And then it was time for me to leave Los Angeles and Tijuana and back to Los Angeles. And I said, all right, but let's take a picture. It's time for me to go. And I remember that day, right there and then, that little girl ran and sat on my lap, and she took a picture with me. So what do I do as an artist? My responsibility. How do I give that child back her innocence? And so as an artist, I came back to Los Angeles in my studio, and I decided to paint a canvas. And in this canvas, I captured the image of a brother and sister. And if you look around her, there's those rays of the Virgin Mary as a form of returning her virginity after the abuse. And then, of course, their father is an alcoholic, and because of that, there is no father in the household. So I had to create a father for them. And that's Tintan, which is a famous Mexican actor, and it's an imaginative cartoon character of a father. And so this is how I capture their self-worth, to let them know that their life matters and that they made an impact in my life. So after I did this canvas, I made a print and I sent it back to Tijuana. And as a matter of fact, next weekend I'm gonna go back and visit them to paint a mural for them. And that little girl and that little boy see themselves in a work of art. as they too matter, and that's the power of art, and that's my responsibility as an artist. And because of my past, I'm able to recognize the trauma and how I can contribute in healing and or help heal that. And of course, as I'm working with other youth in the community and out there in different organizations, I got to take care of my home too. I got 5 kids myself. The last thing I want to do is start neglecting them because I'm too busy doing something else, right? And so I have to recognize my children, my boys, and also let them know that their lives matter. And I'll tell you this much, because of my experience, I'll tell you a little story which is very intriguing. And my little daughter, Maya, and how do we break the gang cycle? How do we break the cycle of trauma? How do we break the cycle of hopelessness or disparity? So I say to this, my little daughter says, Daddy, and I say, yes, Maya. And he goes, I did a drawing. I go, no, you didn't. Yes, I did. And she's only 6 years old, right? And I go, let me see your drawing. No, you're going to laugh. I go, I'm not going to laugh, Maya. Let me see your drawing. And then she goes, okay, you better not laugh. And then she goes, boom, all these little stick figures, right? And then I'm like, oh, my God, Maya, did you do that drawing? Yes, I did. Now she's all conceited, right? And I go, oh, man, you know who Frida Kahlo is? No, who's Frida? Frida Kahlo is a great Mexican muralist, Mom, but you know what? I think you're better. So what I'm going to do is take this drawing and put it in my studio so you and I can give them competition. So what I just did there is I acknowledged her. I made her believe that no matter what she creates is bigger than her. I have given her self-worth. I have inspired her and motivated her for she see herself in the future and not be in despair. That's how we begin to break the cycles of disparity and gang culture. That's what I've learned throughout my journey. That's just a little quick story. And here it is, the ripple effect of the power of art. This is little Gia. Gia is a young woman who is in the custody of Department of Children's Services. The mother, I can speak about this. Mom gave me permission to talk about this precise. It's an important issue. And the mom was in my drawing class, so I have an art academy. And because I became empowered, I decided to build an art academy in downtown Los Angeles to continue to meet the needs of those youth. And thank God for Homebody Industries, as well as Latino Producers Action Network. They gave me the foundation to do so. So little Gia here, she's been through a lot, and her mom is a great artist as well. So I do workshops that are going to rekindle, or also I use art as a mirror of reflection. And here I asked them to draw something of importance, which Laura decided to draw her daughter, who she has no custody of. And the ripple effect and the beauty of art is that at one point, Laura was drawing her daughter so eagerly and excited and happy. Oh, I can't wait till she gets this drawing. Oh, my God, she's precious. She's everything to me, so on and so on and so on. The next week she comes, she slams the pencil on the desk. Boom. I can't draw this no more. I'm like, what's going on? And I take her out of my class, and she goes, I feel guilty. I feel in shame. I feel bad at the fact that I can't be with my daughter. I feel like worthless. And she pushes the image. And so I had to do my little counseling skills and remind her of her importance and bring her back to her senses and talk about the protocols and la. And then the next week she comes back and she followed my suggestions and was able to complete the drawing. And in one of her visits, she takes the drawing to her daughter. And look at that smile that Gia has, a memorable moment that forever will be with her daughter. No matter of what impact of the trauma that she's experiencing, that drawing created by her mother will forever nourish that little soul of hers. That's the ripple effect of my art academy. And this is another story. I'll leave you with this. And not only do I educate the kids, but I also educate the teachers, the instructors, because of the amount of numbers of students in class. Sometimes as instructors, as teachers, we tend to forget what these kids have to carry. There's a community tile wall we call the Community Tile Wall Project. And in this project, I ask the kids, I create a safe space. I walk in and they're looking at themselves in the mirror. I ask the proper questions. I don't sugarcoat anything. I go in there and I say, how many of you are from Boyle Heights? Of course, they all raise their hands to break the ice, right? How many of us have seen gang members in the household? My dad's a gang member and he smokes weed all day. Yeah, but that should not define who you become as a person, and I'm going to show you how. How many of us have seen domestic violence in the household? I've seen my dad push my mom down the stairs, laughing, no coping skills whatsoever. And then I say, I too come from that. And I start to take myself back when I was 6 years old, 7 years old, and experiencing all that, so that they feel not alienated, but that they feel the safe space and they can see that I am also coming with those issues. So it normalizes things for them in a sense that the movement can begin. For example, this drawing here. So I say, okay, come on, we're going to pick up something, a person, a place, or a thing that brings you comfort in times of trial, in times of whatever that may be. So this little boy comes up, and he decided to draw this image, right? I'm trying to like keep it short, but this drawing came from this little boy named Jose, and I remember saying, "Can I draw anything, sir? Anything that brings you comfort. You don't have to be an artist to be able to communicate and use art as a voice. No, necessarily. There's no rights and wrongs in art. Art is art." One of the little boys says, "Okay," so he starts drawing his little brother's toys, and I go, "Okay, come on up, Pablo. It's time to share your image." So he comes up and he goes, I go, "What you draw?" He goes, "This drawing here is a image of my brother's toys, and I drew my brother's toys because he passed away, and I haven't seen my brother in a long time." So he runs to his little desk, and he puts his shirt over his head, and my responsibility, my job is to come and I shrug his shoulders, and I tell him, "It's okay. You're smiling from above. He's excited at the fact that you even thought about him. But do me a favor, remove your shirt from over your head. There's no need to live in shame." All right, who's next? And this is when this little boy comes up. I go, "Sir, come on up." Okay, there's an image of my brother, and me and my brother, we were going in the park, and you see his face? He had a smiley face. But then the killer came and shot my brother in the head, and he killed him in front of me. But there's still hope, sir, because you see the sun? That's hope. And then the little line that comes from the cloud, that's God taking my brother. And he cries and he walks away. And then it's my job to make connections, to let them know that every life matters, that they're not alone. There is no us and them. It's only us. Little Pablo over here drew the little Jose drew the toys of his brother who passed away. Pablo, your brother was murdered. He passed away. There's a connection there. You're not alone. And so I start doing that throughout the thing. And then the teacher says, "Fabian, how do you do it? You come in here, and in a matter of minutes, you get that out of them." And I say, maybe because I know what they have to carry, or I always keep in mind what they have to carry, or because I tend to ask the proper questions, or maybe they're just looking at themselves in the mirror. And then she goes, "Well, that little kid's a class clown, very disruptive in class." I walked to the wall, I ripped his image off. This is why his brother was murdered. So again, those are some of the stories I have, and today I'm very grateful at the fact that I work at Homebody Industries, and I continue to be a strong leader within that, and continue to impact my community. And equity, I was hearing about equity, and that's how we function at Homebody Industries. We recognize that we don't work on equality because not everything fits everyone. We have to understand that every individual has something different else to carry, although the similarities are there. But whatever works for me is not going to work for the individual, but we have to accept them and recognize them, meet them where they're at, and build upon that. And that's the beauty of Homebody Industries. We work with the ones who are less likely to succeed. And we have tattoo removal and all these other services that are going to allow someone to reclaim the truth of who they are. I'll leave you with that, because I can go on and on and on, but we'll get into a conversation. Thank you.
I don't know what to say. I need a minute. Okay. Thank you so much. I think I'm just going to stage a couple of questions which I would love to hear more from you about. And I think the people in the room also want to hear more stories. I wish we had enough time for all of you to just keep on going on and on about this. But I think one of the key things that's often kind of coming up when talking about practice and when talking about competitions and trying to get funding is that none of these stories actually work when you're applying for contests. You don't really get to tell about things beyond infrastructure when you're trying to put things into practice. Infrastructure always comes down to code, machines, equipment, lab spaces, and so on. But I think I would want to hear more about it, because in all your stories, what you've really shown us is how infrastructure is about safety and trust and love and care and relationships and so on, which gives us a very different idea both maybe of equity but also that of innovation. Right? Innovation is not about just introducing new tools and technologies, but about maybe thinking about the people that we are working with differently. And I was wondering if you want to kind of tell us more a little bit about infrastructure that goes beyond just these materially quantified things, which we get so obsessed about when especially talking about digital media and learning.
Well, yeah.
Can you switch your mic on? Okay, sorry.
but
Check.
I did not touch it.
It might not be on.
It might not be on.
There you go. Hello.
Yeah.
Well, so
There you go.
I sat here listening to what you guys were saying, and in some way, in terms of the infrastructure you were talking about, you both mentioned two very important things. And one of that was the safe environment and safety. And the other one was simply acknowledging and recognizing individuals. And your talk kind of captured that very well. And you gave us many examples about that. I think from what you guys do and the things that matter, it can condense it into those two. But for me, those were the two things that I worked away with a lot. And it's an infrastructure around the safe environment. And the environment wasn't in the building and the space. It was also just in the thinking and the ways in which we interacted with people and the space that allowed young people to share, to be who they were. And that was also embodied in how we recognized and interacted with them. And I think those were pretty fundamental.
Yeah, I'll elaborate a little bit. So when I talk about safety, I don't mean four walls, security guard, somebody making sure you don't get hurt, although that is important. But I was more so talking about just the safety that I understand who you are and I believe in you, and you can too. You have free reign to explore, be yourself, be creative. And what usually comes out of that environment, maybe by the second week of any program that we do, students often ask, why do white people think we can't do this? So me being an African-American woman, just seeing me and not having a white male there to kind of say, have them think, should I ask this question? They know they can talk. So we freely have these conversations. You know, there's just going back to when Kwaku and Hamza said, Mr. Shah, they never saw black people code before. I mean, it was that type of safety, that you can actually be yourself and bring up topics that may not necessarily be the most comfortable in any other environment. So just to elaborate.
Thank you.
I'm with.
You're with me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Then I think the next question, and this is my last one before I open up to the floor, I think what was fascinating in all of the three presentations, they're not presentations, they're stories. All of the three stories was that there is a difference between who we see as an innovator and who gets to innovate, right? It's coming out very distinctly. And I think all of you touched upon the fact that you need to first begin with the premise that this person can innovate, that this person can code, that they can become who they want to be. And I was wondering if you want to talk more about it a little bit.
I mean, I like, for me, it's just, I've learned to make miracles with nothing, I guess you would say. You know, it's just about the passion that I carry. But I still recognize that here, where I come from in Boyle Heights, there's a lot of changes taking place, right? Gentrification, you will call it, but it's just remodeling for me. But I think that we still fall short. I still hear the voice of my community. I'm still there trying to contain it. But what happens, and I feel that continues to happen, is that as they're remodeling these locations of Boyle Heights and enhancing it and giving it a facelift, they only do the main streets, but in the inner streets where there's the communities of barrios or the young kids, you know, how do we just start to get creative where we include them as part of to help contextualize what Boyle Heights is going to become? And I use Boyle Heights as an example because that's what's happening right now. And I think, you know, creating more opportunity where they too can help design or shape what the community of Boyle Heights is going to become. Because then what that does is build resentment and anger when they're not included and they feel like they are separated or they don't matter. And I think that's why it makes my work a lot harder, because it's like I'm constantly trying to change perspective. Don't think in that way. They're not out to get you. Mm-hmm. It's like what you do now. And then, but at the same time, like how much more can I continue to say that when it's happening before their eyes and there's no places or spaces of inclusion? And I think that's why I was able to create a place of inclusion, but it takes a community effort, you know, it's a bigger issue.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm along those lines, but it's just something that I
Yeah,
think.
so going back to our earlier mini experiments or research study, I'm looking at what was written down, and the image with the, I guess, diverse group of kids is the only image where a person is identified. Every image had a person in it, but only that picture across the board, across all raters, heard kids. Any other picture, it was some other object in the picture. And this is DML. We're the ones doing the work. So this is what I deal with every day. This is what the kids see and experience. They're not being seen. They're not being heard. So it's just, if we don't as a community, if we don't as a community see them, how is anyone else going to see them?
Okay. We do have some time to maybe reflect on this in terms of what are the kinds of structures of how do we become complicit in these processes so easily? How is it that despite all of these concerns that we have, and we all work with different communities in classrooms, outside of them, and so on, and yet when it comes to there seems to be almost like a dearth of imagination of what our communities can become, or who are the kinds of people that we're working with. And I think that's a point that you bring up really well, Leshell. There's lots of people also responding to that on Twitter, and maybe that's something we need to pick up in a much larger discussion again. I think it touches all our work. For someone like me, it sometimes often happens like, you kind of get boxed as this person who does work on India, and so you can talk on behalf of India. But every time we work with communities who do not share the same privileges that I come from, it's a reminder of how much I take for granted, the kind of contexts and situations people can live within. And that it's necessary when talking about infrastructure of learning or infrastructure of equity, to first start maybe imagining them as people like us, as opposed to these others that we need to work with and do something with. So I really appreciate that in some ways. There are 2 microphones across the room. If there are questions, responses, comments from the floor to these 3 fabulous presentations and talks, we have some time to do it.
I'll also take time to say what I wanted to say, so
Please do.
excuse me for my emotional moment. So in terms of innovation, with Youth App Lab, we told all the students that it wasn't part of the curriculum per se. It has become part of our curriculum since, but that was the first year we were doing something like that with that much funding. And so we constantly had informal conversations with the students to say, you can start a company building apps. You can become entrepreneurs. And so we kind of interjected conversations around becoming an entrepreneur, financial management, et cetera. And Hamza, which I forgot to say, he and his brother actually started an app development company from that experience. Total, I think Youth App Lab has about, students must have made maybe close to 40 apps that year. We published about 8 of them on what I always say Google Market, Android Market, because that's what it was called, but it's now called Google Play. Hamza and his brother Muhammad, their last name is Hawkins, and they were inspired by Oprah and started Snickwa Interactive, which is Hawkins spelled backwards. They have a website, snickwainteractive.com. They have also, with that company, also published more apps on Google Play, and they even have mostly games. They love games. They have a game on the Apple Store and they're moving into web development and things of that nature. So for the past 3 or 4 years, they have been operating a company as well. And so they were inspired to innovate and start a company and create whatever game they wanted to make. And so I think total they probably have made about 6 games so far. And then the other part about equity in terms of content, we don't just focus on STEM topics. I tell them, you know what, if you want to be a history teacher, you should still learn how to code, because if you want to make an app for your history class, you don't have to go and find someone to do it. So I'm still waiting for Kwaku to make an app on different percussion instruments. It just fits so well, but he hasn't done it yet, so we'll see what happens. I'll let you all know.
Thank you. There are 3 people there.
Okay, I'm standing here beside Joy, who's 19 years old from East Chicago, Indiana, who's extremely nervous to get to the microphone because this is her very first conference, so I'm just standing with her to welcome her to the microphone.
Hi, I want to be a kindergarten teacher for the local projects in my community. And I was wondering, that picture just shook me, and I don't know how I would react if I saw one of my students draw that in my classroom. So I was wondering, what ways do, I guess, all of you deal with the trauma that you see, just from seeing that and being able to help your students that you are, that you're helping, but being able to go home and, realize that you just heard about how 4 of your students' brothers have died. How do you cope with that, and how do you make yourself better so that you can go in tomorrow and not just hold that on you? Hope that makes sense.
Well, for me, it's important. It's a lot of these kids that I work with, don't even have the actual or the full-on trust with their own biological parents, either because they've been betrayed or been, neglected or what have you. So it's not just a one-time thing. I mean, I still continue to go to that school where that kid did that drawing. So it's just always a follow-up, and that's just to kind of continue to remind that kid that there is a relationship here now. Even though the community may have betrayed you or not stepped up to the plate when time of need, I'm here. At least I'm here. Do the follow-up. And then the beautiful thing of that is that we have Homebody Industries, which is the wraparound services where I can just start guiding them to resources as well. And I think for me, it's always important. Self-care is important. Secondary trauma. Sometimes, the stories can be very heavy and traumatizing for one. But so I still seek therapy. I still, do things myself. I'm an artist, so art continues to help me heal as well. So it's a constant. For me, that's the way I deal with these type of stories.
Oh, thank you.
Wow. So it's interesting that someone talked about funding, and then the story comes up. I try to make it private. I try to deal with it, as you mentioned, just dealing with the students themselves. And I tell all the parents and students who come, we're a part of your family, you're a part of ours at this point. And so now that you've come more than once, we're family. And so that, I think, opens up the trust. But the flip side of that, when it comes to funders, they want to leverage those stories. Media wants to hear about those stories. And I often say, I'm not going to make one of my students, after I've gained his trust, I'm not going to let them see me on television now talking about, this case was different, certainly, but in terms of media and trying to get funding, they're like, so I'll tell you an example. I went through a media training at one point in time. And just to tell a story, just to let Uplift, have me tell Uplift story. And the trainer said, we were talking about a kid who was interviewed, and he said his dad was incarcerated. And the interviewer said, do you really know what incarceration means? And she said, don't you mean jail? And he said, yeah. He said, wouldn't you rather say jail? I mean, that would make everyone kind of be more empathetic. And the kid was like, I want to use the word incarcerated. And they actually almost tried to force him to say jail. And so, in terms of dealing with the students on a day-to-day basis, you can build that wall of safety, but as soon as they step one step outside, somebody is going to come and try to, expose that their pain or their trauma to some advantage in some way. And so it really is unfortunate. And how I deal with it is just we talk. We haven't gotten to drawing yet, but we might try to do that. Or so I might be calling you. But it's a really challenging thing to deal with. So we actually, I brought 3 students to DML 2 years ago and a parent. And Shakira was the only girl. It was 2 boys, Hamza and Muhammad, as a matter of fact. And Shakira's mom has passed since then. She was at DML 2012, I believe. Her mom has passed since then. And so she and I still stay in contact because she can't believe her mom is gone. And so life happens. And you just got to have the training, as he mentioned, and the skills. And believe me, once you see that kid or that drawing, your passion and your love will kick in, and you will know what to do. You will know what to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question there. Is there some? Mimi? Oh. Well, 2 more questions. That's fine.
Oh, well, I just have a comment. First, just appreciation for sharing your stories with both passion and compassion. And it's been really inspiring and I think courageous to hear your stories. And I just wanted to comment on one thing that I find really impressive about the work that all 3 of you are doing, which is that you're embracing the educational mission, which is to meet these kids where they are and create a safe space for them. But you're also, all of your programs are getting your kids out in the world and finding a place for them in the world with really concrete opportunities. And I think that is something that a lot of us really struggle with to do well. And I was just super impressed how you're able to both create that space for them to grow and thrive in a place of safety, but also build the platform to launch them into the world in a really serious way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I wanted to tell you a couple of the words that I said out loud, but not yelling. Yeah. And they had nothing to do with toys. They were play, smiling, and thought. So not necessarily the word kids. I actually said that the first couple of times, and I was like, wow, this is getting boring. So I started saying the things that I saw on their faces instead. And maybe other people did that too, but they were maybe a little drowned out by the excitement around technology. The other thing that I wanted to say is that my experience echoes exactly what you're saying, that accepting youth culture and kind of embracing young people as they are is really important. It's probably one of the most important things that we do at UMedia Hartford. I have a question, though. If my young people had it their way, every single one of them, I'm not going to use absolutes, I'm going to say 99.9% of them would be employed in our space. I would be paying them to do the things that they love. And sometimes I do have the opportunity to offer, contract work to my young people to share their passions with other youth in the space. But are there resources or models or structures that exist out there that I could tap to help my young people explore their passions and in an economically beneficial way, in the same ways that you have? Like, can you point me to something to continue growing that portion of my program?
So in DC, and like most cities, I believe, there's a summer youth employment program. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have that in Hartford, you say? Yeah, we do. But it's limited to about 6 weeks out of the summer, which seems insufficient. Right. I see. So the way, I guess there's 3 ways actually, we try to motivate or compensate students. So for Youth App Lab, we gave them phones for the entire year. So the ability or the knowledge of having their phone, learning these skills, and top with, you can become an entrepreneur and make apps for other people. They knew that our space was for them to learn, and they could market their own skills to make other things for other people. We also have a mentoring program where after you learn for 2 or 3 sessions, then you come teach. And I pay them to teach. So they will get paid to teach, whether it's actually all year round if they want to, and if the resources are there, and if they're old enough. The third one is new, what we're trying to explore now in terms of Urban Kid, teaching them how to make games, but then also with the objective to sell those games to a much larger audience. So if they're learning a skill and they know that hopefully compensation will come at some point because they themselves have purchased a game, they pretty much have faith in that, and that'll motivate them to continue.
Okay, I hope that addresses
We
some
have
of
time
the
for one more.
questions.
Are we done?
Yeah, we're definitely running out of time, and I take responsibility for it. It's a panel moderated by an Indian. I'm sorry. It's called IST in India. It's called Indian Standard Time. We generally think of it as Indian Stretchable Time. But we're only 4 minutes over the time, so bear with us. But will you please join me once again to thank this fantastic panel. Thank you very, very much.
Before you go, I have to say that I just want to shout out to all my academic colleagues and said this is the session you needed to be at. One of the things that I'm just following up on what Mimi says that I think is such an important message is that equity is not just about this designing and access. Every single one of these people is interested in social transformation. It's not just that I'm going to give access to a tool or an opportunity for youth, but I'm really going to focus on how can those tools change lives in material ways. And David, you didn't talk about it, but your work to create prosthetic limbs for people who've been in war-torn parts of the world, that's a kind of different, very different kind of a social imagination about what's possible and how can we use this. And I think this panel really embodied that in their work. And we should all be humbled and so appreciative of the work they do. Just thank you for being here. It's very, very moving. What a wonderful way to have our last plenary, because I think it's exactly the message we were trying to get at. We still have lots of sessions. David's going to say something, and I want him to come up. But we have lots of different wonderful sessions still happening, the cafes, lots of interactions. So I hope this spirit continues through the day and beyond. And I thank you for making this DML such a wonderful, wonderful experience for so many people. And David, let me turn it over to you.
Mimi, can you join me, please? This is our last collective gathering of DML 2015, so we want to use it just as a point to mark our deep appreciation for a range of efforts that have gone into making this possible. I think the panel we've just heard from represents the extraordinary range of engagement, insight, and knowledge that I hope you will agree the conference this year has represented and continues to represent. So we want to begin just by saying thank you to Chris Gutierrez, who's chaired the conference this year. And Mimi has a little gift of our collective appreciation. There are a large number of people that quickly need to be thanked. We usually have a rolling screen of sort of gratitude. We've forgotten it this year. First and foremost, Claudia, without whom this would not. Extraordinary efforts. You don't know the extensive hours, day and night, throughout the night. I've got text at every time of the day and night from her. Really an extraordinary effort. Before I forget, the FAIN group, who are more invisible in a sense, who are the sort of conference organizers for us, arranged the hotel and so on and so forth. So we want to thank Leslie Fain and her group. Our extraordinary staff at the University of California Humanities Research Institute and the DML Research Hub. They're sitting mostly towards the back behind cameras and so on. James and Amanda and Mari and Jameson and Marites and Ann and Jen, Kenny and Mimiko Cruz, and who else am I missing? If there's anybody else I'm missing, you're duly named, right? So thank you all. Thank you for bearing with the material arrangements. We're working on 4 things for next year: the conference theme, the conference venue, the elevators, and the weather. Thank you. Thank you very much. This has been extraordinary. We look forward to engaging you and continue to engage you as we go forward with the new formations around the Digital Media and Learning Initiative. Thanks very much.